In the closing months of World War II, the Pacific had transformed into a vast arena of destruction. Once powerful fleets now rested at the bottom of the ocean, and skies that once carried proud national colors now roared with American aircraft. The Empire of Japan, which had launched the war with confidence and boldness, was reduced to defending the last fragments of its dominion. Factories lay in ruins, cities burned nightly under relentless Allied bombing, and experienced pilots had become a rarity. The war that Japan believed would be swift had turned into a slow, crushing collapse. Yet, among the wreckage, one symbol of unmatched strength still remained: the super battleship YAMATO. She was more than metal and machinery. She represented the ambitions of an empire and the final echo of a naval philosophy that was already losing relevance. Conceived in secrecy. In the 1930s, YAMATO was Japan's attempt to ensure dominance in the Pacific. Her construction was hidden from foreign eyes, her specifications guarded behind layers of deception. Engineers designed her with a single belief: that no enemy ship should be able to rival her firepower or endure her blows. Her armor was nearly half a meter thick in places, her internal compartment structure was labyrinthine, and her hull was so massive that many Japanese ports had to be modified just to accommodate her. The pride of her design, however, were the legendary 18.1-inch guns, so powerful that even the United States Navy never matched them in size. These guns could fire a 3,200-pound shell farther than any battleship in history. The Japanese believed YAMATO could take on an entire enemy fleet alone. But by 1945, wars were no longer decided by giants of steel. They were decided in the sky. Aircraft carriers had reshaped warfare. Air superiority now defined victory and defeat. America understood this. Japan learned it too late. YAMATO, once designed to be a symbol of invincibility, had spent most of the war hidden in port with little fuel and no strategic role. Her massive guns were useless if she could not safely reach a battlefield. As the Battle of Okinawa began, one of the largest and deadliest operations of the Pacific War, the Japanese High Command faced an impossible situation. Okinawa was the last barrier before the American assault on the Japanese mainland. Losing it would mean exposing Japan itself to invasion. And so, despite knowing the odds, the commanders searched for a dramatic act capable of slowing the American advance. That act became Operation Tengu. Under this desperate plan, YAMATO and a small escort force would make a high-speed dash toward Okinawa. They would have no air cover, no hope of reinforcements, and barely enough fuel to reach their destination. YAMATO's mission was to sacrifice herself, to beach on the shores of Okinawa and fire her colossal guns as a stationary fortress until she was destroyed. Her presence alone was expected to boost morale for Japanese soldiers fighting on the island. Everyone involved understood what this meant. It was, in every sense, a death mission. Before departure, YAMATO's crew, over 3,000 men, prepared for a fate they could not escape. Many wrote letters to families they would never see again. Some placed personal belongings in lockers, knowing they would never return for them. Others walked the decks in silence, staring across the waters that would soon become their grave. Even those who still believed in the empire understood that the Yamato's final mission was more symbolic than strategic. Life aboard the ship in those final hours was heavy with emotion. Officers attempted to maintain discipline, but an unspoken truth lingered in the halls. The super battleship, once built as the pride of Japan, was now going out not to win a war, but to die honorably. Yet even in that despair, the crew took pride in serving aboard the greatest battleship ever created. They cleaned her guns, prepared her shells, checked every valve and engine. If they were to fall, they would fall with dignity. In the early hours of April 6, 1945, Yamato began her final voyage. As she slipped out of harbor and into the open sea, her massive silhouette cast a shadow across the waters. The engines rumbled like a beating heart. Escort ships fell into formation, light cruisers and destroyers, themselves short on ammunition and fuel. Above them, the skies were empty, but not for long. American reconnaissance was relentless. Submarines scanned the seas. Radar-equipped aircraft patrolled day and night. The U.S. Navy understood exactly what Yamato represented. She was too powerful to ignore, too symbolic to be left alone. If she reached Okinawa, even as a stationary platform, she could inflict catastrophic damage on the invasion force. For Yamato, the journey had only begun. Ahead of her lay the mightiest concentration of American air power ever assembled in the Pacific. Hundreds of aircraft carriers and support vessels stood ready. The Americans would not hesitate. They would throw everything, fighter bombers, torpedo planes, dive bombers, at the approaching giant. And Yamato, isolated and alone under the vast sky, would soon face a storm of steel and fire unlike anything seen in naval history. As Yamato continued her southward charge across the open sea, the American fleet was already preparing. Every radar station, every carrier group, and every patrol aircraft had one mission: locate and destroy the Japanese super battleship before she could come within range of Okinawa. The skies over the Pacific, once vast and silent, soon filled with engines and radio chatter. Pilots were briefed, fuel lines hissed, and aircraft were armed with torpedoes, armor-piercing bombs, and rockets. Yamato, the pride of the Imperial Navy, was about to face the full, unrestrained might of American naval aviation. Just after dawn on April 7, 1945, U.S. scouts spotted the Japanese task force. Yamato was unmistakable, a dark shape cutting through the waves, leaving a long white wake behind her. Her escort ships attempted evasive maneuvers, but the Americans were already relaying her position. The moment the report reached the fleet command, an order echoed across the carriers. Launch everything, one after another. American aircraft roared off their decks. The air filled with Avengers, Hell Divers, and Corsairs, each carrying heavy ordnance designed specifically to cripple giant warships. In total, more than 300 aircraft were dispatched to ensure Yamato could not escape. The pilots knew the stakes. Yamato was the largest battleship ever built, and destroying her would deliver a decisive psychological blow to Japan on board Yamato. The crew braced themselves. Alarms rang across the ship. Anti-aircraft gunners ran to their stations. Officers shouted instructions above the rising noise of engines and machinery. Men loaded shells into the enormous anti-aircraft guns. The ship vibrated as her turbines pushed her to maximum speed. Everyone understood what was coming. Shortly before noon, dark specks appeared on the horizon. The sky began to hum, then roar. The first wave of American aircraft descended from the clouds. Yamato's gunners opened fire instantly. Her anti-aircraft batteries lit up the sky with orange flashes. Tracers arced upward like streams of fire. Explosions erupted around the attacking planes as they began their attack runs. But there were too many. The first torpedo bombers swept in low over the waves Yamato attempted to turn, but her massive size made quick maneuvering impossible. Torpedoes slammed into her flank, one after another, sending shock waves through her hull. Water poured into the lower decks. The ship began to list slightly, though her crew fought to counter flood and stabilize her. Then came the dive bombers. They plunged from the sky, releasing heavy armor-piercing bombs that fell with terrifying speed. Several exploded across Yamato's deck, tearing open steel plating and sending fireballs into the sky. Crew members near the impacts were thrown across the deck. Smoke began to billow from her superstructure. Still, Yamato fought back. Her gunners managed to shoot down several American aircraft, filling the air with debris and burning wreckage, but the waves of attackers were relentless. Each squadron repeated the same deadly pattern: torpedoes to weaken her hull, bombs to shatter her deck, and rockets to tear through her exposed areas. The Americans were determined to break the giant. Inside the ship, chaos took hold. Corridors filled with smoke, Damaged compartments flooded rapidly. Engineers struggled to maintain power as the ship's internal systems began to fail. Officers attempted to relay orders, but communications lines were collapsing. The once invincible super battleship was slowly being pushed beyond her limits. A massive explosion rocked Yamato when one of the bombs struck near her. Forward magazine's flames surged upward, engulfing the tower bridge. Many officers were killed instantly. The list grew worse. 10 degrees, 15 degrees, 18 degrees to port. The ship's stabilizers could no longer compensate. Yamato was dying. Still, the crew refused to surrender to panic. They continued firing every weapon that still worked. Some gunners were so determined that they kept shooting even as explosions tore apart their mounts. Men scrambled to control flooding, to put out fires, to help wounded comrades. Their resolve mirrored the very spirit Yamato represented, unyielding even in defeat. But nature itself began to betray the giant. As more torpedoes ripped through her port side, the battleship leaned heavily into the sea. Water surged across her deck. Aircraft carriers miles away could see smoke rising like a pillar into the sky. The American pilots circled for another pass. They knew the end was near. At 2:20 p.m., Yamato suffered a final catastrophic explosion. Her forward magazine detonated with such force that it sent a towering column of fire and smoke thousands of feet into the air. The shock wave was felt by ships miles away. Witnesses described the blast as a rising mushroom cloud, a horrifying symbol of the ship's destruction. Within moments, Yamato, the greatest warship ever built, rolled onto her side and began to sink beneath the waves. Many of her crew were trapped inside, unable to escape the flooding compartments. Others were blown overboard or thrown into the burning sea. Of the more than 3,000 men on board, only a few hundred survived. The rest vanished into the depths with their ship. As the waters closed over the broken Titan, silence fell across the ocean. The age of the battleship, once the pride of every navy on Earth, had ended. Air power had claimed absolute dominance, and with Yamato's sinking, a chapter in naval history was sealed forever. For Japan, the loss was more than military. It was the symbolic death of an era, the fall of the last great hope of a nation fighting against impossible odds. For the world, the destruction of Yamato became one of the defining moments, proving that even the mightiest machines of war could not stand against the overwhelming force of modern air power. In the years that followed, Yamato's legacy endured not through victory, but through memory, a reminder of ambition, sacrifice, and the final stand of a giant whose time had passed.